so I grew up with the stories. Freddie was a good friend of my mom, so they shared a lot of their experiences. Rest of my family on both sides, my mom and dad, grandparents, aunts, cousins, they all perished in concentration camps, so I never met any close relative besides my parents. So that's a little bit of my background. I've been working in many schools through the years about this subject matter and sharing with these kids. And so my mom, when she was alive, and my mother-in-law, my husband, mom, that she's also a survivor. She'll be celebrating her 96th birthday next Saturday in Israel, and she still goes and talks to schools just like
Really?
Freddie, yes. So introducing Freddie, a great friend and a terrific person, that she'll share her story. She was around your age when she experienced Nazi Germany and survived.
Well, that's quite an introduction, and I really don't know where to begin. Yeah, actually there's one good point you just made out. Kristallnacht, you all heard of Kristallnacht? Yeah. Which was actually the beginning. I don't think I have to go into Hitler's Nazi Germany. Everybody knows it. But Kristallnacht was the night of broken glass, and that was on November 9th, I will never forget, where the Hitler's organization, told his soldiers or soldiers or whatever they were to go into all Jewish houses, break everything, and you can beat them, but don't kill anybody. And with this, it so happened that a Gentile friend of ours walked home from a game and heard them talking, so he came running right over to us to warn us, and he wanted us to go home with him. My mother wouldn't go, but she sent me home. My father at that time was already arrested. My father was arrested in 1931.
Sorry.
My fault.
No, that's good.
That's better?
Yes.
In 1936, I think, or 38, on a charge that he had an affair with a Jewish woman. Non-Jewish woman, I was right the first time. And he was arrested and got 10 years in prison. From there he was taken out and then put into Auschwitz, where he died. I don't have a regular date, but it's in March 1945, which soon. But I did tell you, I got his number, his concentration number. Yeah, it was tattooed. Other than this, I don't know anything. But this is so where do I go from there?
You were warned about Kristallnacht.
I warned about Kristallnacht.
Your friends saw.
And
your mom stayed in the apartment.
Hmm?
Your mom stayed
In the apartment, yeah, she stayed in the apartment. And I came back in the morning, and on the way back, it was in November, there was, you could see all the broken windows and stores where they broke and looted naturally everything. And I remember one thing, we had, I don't know how famous a painting it was, but it was a very good painting my mother loved. And they just took the knife and cut it. Where she said, if they wanted it, they could have taken it, but just to destroy. It wasn't to take something, give it to use it for something. It was just, now a word is in my head. Is that called genocide?
Is what called genocide?
When they take over, like I just told that day.
Yeah, well, I mean, these kids have actually, who remembers what the root of genocide, we would have taken it apart into words.
Yeah.
Manning, what would it be? So, the first part, geno, race, right? And C-I-D-E is a suffix. Killing, so it's the killing of an entire group.
Right,
Race.
right. And that's what it was.
Yeah.
Because they didn't ask for anything. If you had blue eyes, or Hitler said the German folk has to have blue eyes and blonde hair. If you ever should look at some Nazi pictures, there is not one blonde.
Hitler included.
Oh, Hitler. Yeah, he was so. We'll not talk about it. But I'm talking, and I really don't know if I get you, and if, what would you want
About
me?
that you were not allowed to go to school.
Oh yeah, I could not go to school. I had only a private education, which before up to 38, I went to a private teachers who came to the house, and then I studied myself. I taught myself English. I had studied English when I started to study English when I was a child, because my parents wanted to migrate to America. And it was very difficult to get out because you needed a visa, and they had so many visas. And the visa depended on how many people want to go to America. And Germany was a fairly well-to-do country, so normal people, unless they were Jewish, didn't want to leave Germany, so it was a long waiting list, and we never made it. And in the meantime, I met a lady on the street who, when I was called names from the children, and they called me dirty Jew and all kind of things, and she stopped them, and she sort of was always around near where I was, till finally she came to the house, and she introduced herself, and she brought us some fruit, and so that was just about 2 weeks where we got the postcard that in 2 weeks we all have to report to a certain place, and we will be sent away from there. What's the word? Because they are afraid of our safety, which means they would put us in the concentration camps. And she then said to my mother, I'll hide her. And the rest of the year, the rest of the war, I lived with them, and people there. They were a young couple.
Well, her husband was in the army.
Yeah, her husband was an officer in the army, but not a drafted officer in the army. And it turned out that she was a quarter Jewish, and she knew this because before she got permission from the Nazis to marry that man, she had to be examined. If she has, and she was lucky just the nape of her neck was Jewish, and that didn't interfere, and so she got permission to marry that man. And yeah, I think I said I lived with them, and they had a little boy. He was at that time 2 years old, and we were in touch until they died. You met them.
Tell where you live with them and what happened to the countryside.
Yeah, we're living in the countryside. We had our own bunker. When the air raids came, he had built a bunker so that, because I couldn't go, I had to wear a star naturally, I forgot about that little thing. So, and if you were caught without wearing the star, that was the end of your life. Everything you did wrong was the end of your life. And I really don't know if it really was the end of your life, but they certainly killed you eventually.
So the husband in this family is away fighting for Germany.
No, he was an officer, and he was away, but not far, and he came home a lot.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he was in.
His position? What was his position in army?
He was an officer, I don't know what, but he was an engineer in private life, and so consequently to whatever profession he had, they used them for, and then I couldn't have any food rations because I didn't exist anymore. My mother had reported me missing, and so the food rations were very skimpy, but she still had to anything. And then my mother, of course, eventually was put in a concentration camp, and my grandmother and my father, of course, was already gone. And so long ago.
Oh, they found you that you were...
Yeah, I was, this is a few years later, I was hiding, and of course I had no identification papers, and there was just an accidental bomb fell down, and they asked for IDs, and again I had no IDs, and that's when they arrested me. It was almost towards the end of the war. By this time, they put me in a forced labor camp. And funny enough, that labor, the party workers around here, that's where I worked as forced labor. But it wasn't their fault. It's what the government gave them. They also had French prisoners of war and not sure, French prisoners and English prisoners of war. And the English were very helpful. They knew every day what's going to happen. I don't know how. And every noontime, there came a locomotive going down for whatever reason, I don't know. But every time that locomotive came down, there was one plane, dropped the bomb on the locomotive and took off again. And
How old were you?
kid, what year was this?
44.
44. 15, 14?
Yeah, so she was 15 years old at the time. And she was in a forced labor camp.
Compared, I mean, it was such a horrible time. That was good. No, I was supposed to be, I was supposed to work with the French, those lights to guide the planes. Fernwerfer.
Got flares? Searchlights?
Searchlights, yeah. And I was fortunate that they decided not to take me. But I wish
It was the end of the war already.
it was almost the end of the war, and
Liberated you.
the American. this is the good part now. I was then, when we were at the Heidelberg, one morning, and we walked in, and we had seen that everybody was gone. And I met a friend from France, and Hannelore and I were always together. And so when we saw that they all were gone, so we went. And there were so many empty houses, we found out, because everybody was gone. Because
The Germans.
the Germans, well, it's a German town, yeah. And they were all running away because the story was the Russians are coming. But no Russian ever came. The Americans came. And where we were was right on the Main River. And we could see these little boats, which fix up that the Americans coming over. And where we stayed, there was up on the hill, and there lived some nuns, and we saw them going up to the chapel with the white flag. So sure enough, they put a white flag up, and the Americans came over from the other side of the mine and took over. Not one shot was, and we had occupied our house prior to this because people had been running away because they were afraid of the enemy. So shortly after this, there came an officer with 2 soldiers, I think, and they wanted to see the house because they looked at the best houses to save for their soldiers. And we saved our. So in any case, we went in. And shortly after, just an officer walked in, looked up at the house, and he said, "We have to leave in 2 hours, and we can't take anything with us because he occupying this for his soldiers." And with my broken English, which I thought I'm so great in English at that time, I said, "Well, why?" I said, "Why?" Very sternly, "Why?" I said, yeah, because we were waiting for you guys to come. And I said, we are Jewish. So immediately he asked us about Jewish holidays. He happened to be Jewish. And immediately he put an off-limits sign on, and we stayed in this house, and they came up and they made us coffee, and my friend said, well, there is going to be some ground in the coffee so we can have a cup of coffee in the morning. And we looked and there was no ground. We couldn't understand. That was my first introduction to instant coffee.
Freddie, could we just go back a little bit, and when you went into hiding when you were younger, can you talk a little bit about the risk that this family was taking?
Enormous.
In hiding you?
Yeah, yeah. Especially where they were. Well, the good part of it was that they were originally from Berlin and moved to Nuremberg, where I was, because of where her husband was stationed. So they didn't know the families too well, and everybody thought that I'm part of the family. And the little boy called me Mommy, like his mother, because she went out quite a lot to see her husband, and I was 15, 16 years old. I took care of a 2-year-old baby. And we are still in touch. Manfred, he lives now in Toronto.
He's a son. They
That's
passed
their son.
away.
Yeah, they both passed away. But Manfred is still around. And
They were arrested too when you were arrested, right?
not at the, wait a minute, they were, not when I was, oh yeah, at the end they were arrested. But it was shortly before the end of the war. And Walter it was a matter of days in the war. Walter got appointed by the American soldiers that because there was a German who was not a Nazi, who was, and they appointed him as police officer for that area there. So
I just want to add here a little bit. I met this couple. They lived in Toronto and they came many times to visit. Really the nicest people, and what was very interesting that they really didn't think they did something special. They never really wanted to talk about it too much or be praised about it. This is something they felt they just did because it was the right thing to do. So they never got any official recognition from the cities they lived or any place, you know, like many people do, they call the righteous Gentiles that saved Jews. They were very humble and just sweet, nice people, and they just felt Freddie was part of their family, and that's what's the right thing to do for them.
Yeah, I think a lot of the kids here, the students here, have had questions to me, and I imagine others, about kind of the willingness or the compliance of many of the adults in Germany at the time. So this man, the father in the family, was it typical? I'm not talking about the Nazis as much as just the conscripted or the drafted soldiers.
That is very hard to say because whoever did it didn't advertise it. And but I know a few kids my age, and they were, and I could never talk to them, but I always was suspicious that they are being hidden by some or there's one in particular. She lived in my grandmother's neighborhood, and she had the same birthday I had, the same day, the same year, and so we became a little friendly. And she was staying with this elderly lady, and she was real Nazi. She wore a big the Frauenschaft and all this. She did us all to hide that girl. Afterwards I found out. My grandmother met her on a trip to America, and she was on the same boat with her. And that's how they found each other, years after the war. But it's too bad that I can't think of all the things. But nobody has any questions?
The gentleman you asked.
When did you come to America, and why New Bedford? Did you settle here in this area?
I came as a refugee. My first husband was a refugee. He was actually from Poland, and he went through the whole thing in Poland. He lost 5 siblings, his parents, and we met at a Hanukkah party in Nuremberg. You never met Kiva, did you? And he wanted to go to Palestine. And my mother just said, get out from here. It's no place for a Jewish child to be here. I don't want you to have a future here. You can't. And so we eventually got married, and we came over because he was from Poland. He was a refugee. I was from Germany. I wasn't a refugee to come to America. And that's how we came over here.
And how did you end up in the New Bedford area?
To the Hayas, the Hebrew...
It's a Jewish organization that places Jewish refugees, immigrants in different places in the United States.
And we came here, and it was horrible. I had friends of my parents who came over before the war, or right after, and what was his name? And they told us, I met Kisslinger, who was a friend of my parents because they lived in the neighborhood in Germany. Kissinger, not Kisslinger. And all these people. And we all lived at that time they lived in New York on Washington Heights. That was this. But then because my husband had that contract, he was going back to school, and never happened. We came here because he wanted to study, whatever it was he wanted to study. But it didn't work out. When we came here, it was the worst thing we did because it was such a small town, and they didn't have much interest and much means to help people who, like my husband, was a teenager when that all started, had no trade, had no nothing. He wanted to study medicine. And many people had to change their life and couldn't fulfill their dreams because Is this one?
No, you're good.
You had your uncle, Florence, and very bright, intelligent man. He worked in a factory till he.
Freddie, could you talk a little bit about, you're from Nuremberg, and the students here know a little bit about Nuremberg, its importance as a city before the war, and certainly after the war. Could you talk a little bit about what it was like living there before the war? Well, certainly things were getting bad, and you got to see it firsthand with all of the rallies and the gatherings that were taking place.
But Nuremberg was the city for the parties. Every fall day, Hitler and his gang came to Nuremberg and stayed there for a week. Whenever that week was, we always tried not to be in Nuremberg. That was still before you were a star or so. Afterwards, you couldn't move anymore. When Hitler, in his 1,000-year Reich, he planned, you just couldn't have a telephone, couldn't have a car, couldn't drive before this. If you wanted to drive your car out of the city on a weekend, like go away a little from the town, every little hamlet had a sign, Jews not wanted, Jews not wanted. You couldn't even go and have a cup of
hostels.
No hotel room. Yeah. There was, I remember one hotel, and I was a kid, and evidently, I don't know if they were Jewish. I mean, it was like a little bed and breakfast hotel. And my mother and I spent a week there as a vacation. But I don't know the details, but this was not Nazi.
Exception. Was an
It
exception.
was an exception. But as far as living in the city, everything was rationed. You got maybe 2 eggs a month, and this is for the average, and we got less. And we could only go maybe get a quarter of a cup of skimmed milk, and you could only go shopping certain hours. And if I would be number 2 and then number 3 and 4 came in, I would have to let them go ahead. By the time nobody was in the store anymore, they didn't have anything in it. And everything was in ration cards, and they had different kind of ration. There were the normal ration cards, and there were the ration cards for children, and there were ration cards for people who have heavy work to do, and then there was the Jewish one who had a J on it. And so they also wanted to, they asked us, well, of course we had to move out of our houses. And in our case, they let us have 2 rooms in our house. And in the rest of the house, were people who came over from Studenten Deutschland, which is near Prague, this area. And if they were Nazis, they all came to Germany because they got special treatments from the Nazis. And they put them in our homes, and you had no right to take a toothpick. It wasn't yours anymore. And
So the rallies were getting larger and larger in Nuremberg. The restrictions were getting increasingly severe. Did the Jewish community realize that things are getting worse and worse? And did you start to see some people trying to escape? I know the visa situation was, obviously quite significant.
Yeah.
But did you see more and more people recognizing?
oh, they all recognized, and they were all scared, and they all, it was like a clique of people together. You were not from Nuremberg anymore. I mean, you were from Nuremberg, but you were a Jew. And you couldn't take a streetcar. You couldn't do any of this. When my friend who hit me, how I escaped Nuremberg in the streetcar, and I had my star, and she said, she goes on the streetcar, and I go on the streetcar, but I had to leave the house with my star. But by the time I got on the streetcar, I had to dispose of it, like not mine. And then when she got out of the streetcar, I went and I followed her to her house. It was the first time I went to her house. Well, anybody has any questions? A very quiet class here.
Was this star like some kind of metal, or was just?
It was cloth. It was a star, a 6-coin star, yeah, yellow, and on it was written Jude, which means Jew. In Polish, it was written Jew, which means, and you had to wear it on the right side, and you couldn't cover it. My father's mother was a very funny woman, and she was widowed, and my father was also, so she was alone, and she always depended on me. She was afraid to go alone, but when she was with me, she felt like I, the kid, protected her. I always walked on her right side, and she put her arm around me so that half of her star
was hiding the star.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was illegal to go out if you were a Jew without that star sewn into your outer garments. Who has some questions? Get your hand up.
Why did people allow the Holocaust to happen?
That's a good question. It didn't happen overnight. It's a long story going back to the First World War. After the First World War, when Germany, no, it was the Second World War. The Second World War, when Germany lost the war.
First World War.
The first, yeah. When Germany lost the war, and the punishment was so severe, and that people couldn't do anything to bring themselves back on their feet.
Right, these kids have learned a little bit about the treaty of what?
Versailles.
Right, and how it kind of kicked Germany while it was down
Yeah,
and engendered a lot of hard feelings.
that's right. And that's when all these little groups started, like the Nazis and the communists and this, and one wanted to outdo the other. And Hitler was the Führer of the Nazis, and he was probably the most gruesome one. And there were many people, and rightly so, felt, why do we have to be punished for a war which happened in which this was another generation, was a second generation almost. So anything else?
With you being from Nuremberg, I don't know if you were around at the time of the Nuremberg trials, but I didn't know how you felt about that, because obviously, a very small sample, only about 11 people were, brought to court to face what they had done. Do you think that that was something that that you appreciated, I guess would be the word, or do you think that was kind of useless based on how many people were involved?
Well, I just read in the book I gave you has something to do with it. Yes and no. But it was
You were there
I
during
was-
the trials.
yeah,
You were there?
Yeah.
yeah. Because of, I wasn't employed, but I was, because of my English. There were so many people there just to look and show from different countries. It was the first time I think such a thing happened. And they, of course, were all innocent.
The ones on trial?
The ones on trial, yeah, but they had a real fair trial, and until they got the result of, they were all, there was one, I read a book about one, his name was Frank, and he was from Bavaria, and he was governor of Poland. And how he abused the people there. And everybody, yes, that's what he did. How he...
They were saying sarcastically innocent.
Yeah.
They were all guilty.
They were all, yeah. And they're trying... It's interesting what we humans try if it goes on now and then. But before that, they killed people left and right, and not only Jews, gypsies and whatever, handicapped, when you were mentally disturbed, they killed them.
Do you remember what camp you were at?
I wasn't in a camp at that time.
Oh, well, if I'm correct, I thought you may have said you were in a forced labor camp.
Oh, I was in a forced labor camp, yeah, in Fairhaven, in Hafen, Paddy Wagon, if you ever heard of them.
I probably have at some point, I'm just not familiar at the time.
And they had also prisoners of war there, and some Englishmen, and they were not supposed to make them work, it was against the law, but they all worked. And a foreign soldier, if you are a prisoner of war, there's a treaty that they cannot work, correct? But they made them all work. And maybe in a way they were better off than if they treated them. Where I was, they were treated well.
It was end of the war, so it was like the Germans were already kind of running away, and
They did.
and
They
they,
did.
yeah, so
They-
that was your luck.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you wouldn't be here
Yeah.
today.
Why don't you guys get your hands up so it's easier for us to see who might have a question?
Okay, we'll start at this side.
How many people did you know that were killed?
How many people
I
you
don't
know,
know.
like in your
I don't
family,
know. In my family,
friends?
friends, maybe 20, 30. And we had a small family.
Who else?
Do you
Next.
forgive them?
Right?
Do you forgive them?
No. I mean, I wouldn't do the same to them if I had a chance. But no.
Did you ever wonder what would happen if someone killed Hitler earlier?
Well, they tried. There was but it didn't work. There were talks about officers from his own staff. They wanted to get rid of him, but it didn't work.
There were a lot of attempts on his life,
Yeah,
but none were successful, cruelly. Hanson?
yeah, yeah.
What was the thing you feared the most?
I'm sorry?
What did you fear the most?
What did you fear the most?
The fear the most.
The most was that they could win.
When you heard about Hitler escaping to Argentina when they found the underground bunker, how did you feel?
So Hitler to
No,
Argentina.
right. There are a lot of rumors out there that are not, have never been substantiated, one of which is that high-ranking Nazi officials
Yeah,
escaped. Hitler's not usually considered one of them. So that would have been even worse, I suspect, to hear about an escape.
no. Yes,
How did your feelings change when you were running from them towards now?
how did my feeling change?
Yeah, towards like the Holocaust and the Nazis, like from like when you were like running from them towards right now.
Well, there is no Holocaust right now.
Right, how have you changed in these many years since you were experiencing it firsthand? Do you have a different perspective on it? It's not a matter of forgiving, but do you look at that period of history differently now that it's that much more removed from the present?
Time has gives you a chance to know what I mean.
How were you treated in the concentration camp?
In the concentration camp, I wasn't mistreated.
And you were not in concentration.
I was not in a I was in a forced labor camp. And there were no SS, so there were older people, they called organization Todd, and they took care of these kind of camps. And they were old themselves.
And they wanted to protect their workers.
Yeah.
Did you ever meet anybody marked with the purple triangle?
Okay.
So what Kiana's referring to is that, as you had mentioned earlier, it wasn't just Jews, right, who were being targeted by the
Right.
Nazis. You talked about the mentally handicapped, there were the physically handicapped, the gypsies you mentioned, gays,
Right.
and there were also Jehovah's Witnesses who wore a purple star. So I guess in a broader sense, did you know people in these other groups who were also targeted by the Nazis?
I didn't know them personally, but I remember after the war that And it was about a year or so after the war, because I was already with my family, that some gypsies came to our house and they wanted money from us because we are brothers and sisters, and we didn't give them anything because we were told that they're going from house to house, and if you start giving them, there's no end to it. But there are a lot of people came around, even on the streets. You saw people, how did they know that you are Jewish? I don't know. But they wanted help. And there was no need for this because the Jewish communities and these were people who wanted a good thing was, I am out of money and I will send it back to you. Please give me your address. And then once they would have your address, they come all the time. It was a very dysfunctional way of living because everybody was out for themselves. Yeah.
Before the Holocaust all started, did anyone know what was going on? And if they did they try to stop it?
If before the Holocaust started, would anybody have stopped it?
Tried to stop it, yeah.
I don't think so, because Hitler was out to win. There was no question that he called it a 1,000-year Reich.
If I could maybe just elaborate on what I think Nick is trying to get at. So Hitler didn't just come out of nowhere. People saw his political rise and his increased popularity. As his popularity grew, did more and more people, at least quietly, say among themselves, their friends, their family, this guy is nuts and our country is in great danger?
There were people, plenty of people like this, but there were also more who figured that the country was so down. The money didn't have any value. You couldn't, the stores were empty.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like you go out in this today and you couldn't get anything.
So Hitler feeded on these feelings. And
Yeah.
people supported him because
Mr. Rosen, that's one thing that we talk about a lot in school is standing up for any type of hate, for any type of bigotry. And that's why it's so important. Even if it's we deem it a small act, we cannot make any hate acceptable. Because again, we said at the beginning of this, never again. So think about it. These things started small and ended up into a larger scale.
Whenever you saw the Nazi symbol, what came to mind?
It's so engraved in I see it, nothing. It's supposed to be a wheel. And for me, the wheel goes down, not up. If I have to make the Nazi symbol, it would run downwards, not upwards.
It must have been strange as a child in Nuremberg. I'm sure you played with kids for a while who would end up one day perhaps wearing a swastika. You know, the day before you had been playing ball in the street with them, and the next day?
They didn't play with us anymore. She said, my mother said, we can't play with you because you're Jew. I mean, the boycott went all the way down to the children, and that's why you couldn't go to schools anymore either. And they all these adults had the rights over you, especially when you wore a star. And if you're not used to, I came from a good upper middle class family, and I had everything. I remember I had some ice skates, fancy for this time because the skates were right on the shoes and it was just coming out. And I was going to go ice skating, that was at the beginning. And the kid just took them. And I wouldn't say, no, you can't have them.
So you couldn't fight back?
Mm-mm.
Thomas?
Did you ever see Hitler firsthand?
I saw him on the, but not close enough to kill him.
How do you cope with what you've been through?
What?
Say it again.
How do you cope with what you've been through?
You cope as to be through. How you cope?
It's the past. I have a good life. I know I'm not the only one. I had a lot of losses. But it's now 60 years later. My father was killed in Auschwitz. There are many times that I feel like, how can that be possible? How? And I would like to know how he died or what. Because you hear so many stories, they just put him in an oven and this and that. You have to control yourself. And I have a good husband who, when I have these things, he talks to me. My husband is a psychiatrist.
That's useful.
Yeah.
Anyone else? I'm sorry, anyone else we haven't heard from yet? Then okay, go on.
What was your worst injury that you sustained while during the Holocaust?
What was this?
The worst injury you sustained while during the Holocaust?
Were you ever hurt?
No, not physically.
Freddie, to bring it to today, when you see on TV news of ignorant people, vandals, who spray the swastika on buildings and other places, what do you think, and what is your response to those people who don't realize maybe that they're representing the greatest haters in history? So, you know, as someone who witnessed this, what do you say to those people?
They're nuts. What can I say? I can't make them stop. But I want to tell you something very nice to end us all with. For my 90th birthday, this past July, my son took me back to Germany. I wanted to go back to Germany. It's my home. You miss, this is something I will never, I miss my German culture. I miss my poetry, my books, my anything culture. And I can never bring this up here because you probably have the same thing, I don't know. That you hear something and then all of a sudden a little poem comes in your mind or so. I don't have that in this. But when I went to Germany this summer, I met a different kind of Germany, real different kind. And I would go back again. And there was no such thing about Jews. I am always, I've done this, I went before once with my husband. And I don't wear a star anymore, but now I told everybody I am Jewish.
What, maybe to end this, you have a bunch of very eager, attentive young people listening to you, and per what Dr. Abrams and others have said, it's important for them to hear you. Maybe as a final bit of advice, what could you tell them about how they ought to go on with their lives based on what you've learned?
Trust your intuition. Stay away from people you're not sure. And don't argue about different opinions. Be smart. It doesn't help you. But you live in a country, and you live today, that we have so much freedom here. Unfortunately, is it also very much abused by people who think. But you have that inner freedom, what you have, what you've been raised with, what you were born with, that nobody can take you, and defend it, and don't let any idiot tell you differently. That's my idea.
All right.
We wanted to thank you for coming and sharing your story. We have a little Normandin gift for you, so if you wanted to just take a look at that.
Maybe the girls behind Mrs. Myerson will take a
Oh
picture.
my God.
Okay.
That's not necessary.
If you just stand right here behind her.
Me?
The picture. Yeah, you can hold that for her. Very good. It will take this out of the way. We'll take a nice picture.
Can you see your face?
Yeah, let's put that right here. There we go.